There is a good way to be provoked. Of course, there's a bad way. Pastors and deacons are commanded, every time we ordain a pastor or a deacon, I'm confronted with that text for myself. Do not be a quarrelsome person. So we are to be kind, tenderhearted, not letting the sun go down on our anger. And certainly, we are to be angry without sin. But what I hope you see today is the ability to be provoked is actually healthy for you. Looking at verse 16, we see Paul's by himself in Athens. He's waiting for the team to arrive in a place that he has never been before. So I think as we picture Paul in the streets of Athens, he's waiting on Silas and Timothy to arrive. It's important as we see Paul here, as you kind of in your mind's eye picture Paul wandering about the streets of Athens, that you not think of him as some uncultured hillbilly who had never traveled and never seen anything, okay? By this time, we could call Paul a seasoned world traveler, could we not? He has seen many cities. He has seen many types of architecture. He knew about Greek and Roman and Egyptian gods, as well as Babylonian and Canaanite gods. Paul was not simply enamored by Athens because he'd never seen anything before, okay? Don't think that. However, there is something in Athens that he had not seen before. There was something that Athens had that Antioch and Cyprus and Iconium and Lystra and Troas and Philippi and Thessalonica did not have. And that was the incredible, overwhelming presence of idols. Verse 16 says that while Paul was waiting in Athens, this is a great line, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw the city was full of idols. Again, he'd seen idols before. I've seen idols before. How many of you on a mission trip have seen an idol in another place? Raise of hands. Anybody? Many of you have. Okay, it's kind of creepy at first, right? There's a little strangeness to it. Paul was not a newbie, but what Athens had was so far beyond anything he had seen, he was provoked in his spirit. There were statues and temples and holy sites everywhere, every turn, built into the buildings, built into the street corners. Athens was built on idols. So what does that word provoked mean? It's going to be really key to our discussion today. It's the Greek paroxuno, which means an angry irritation, a sharp, bitter disgust. So Paul, as he walked the streets, he looked at idol upon idol, probably witnessed the worship of said idols, had a gut reaction of unsettled anger. So let's ask a question here. As a Christian, was Paul right to be provoked? Was he right to be provoked? Was he right to walk into another culture full of idols and see images and statues and temples covering every available inch in Athens and feel indignant? Was he right to bring in his Jerusalem values, his Christian values, to judge the Athenian culture that was world-renowned for its influence? The biblical answer is yes. Yes, he was. So I'm going to make the case now that not only was Paul right to be provoked, but that you should be able to be provoked. And I have 3 subpoints for how to ensure that you remain able to be provoked. Okay? This may be the strangest sermon you've heard in a while, all right? If you want to be provoked, number 1, first, you can't be desensitized to sin. You cannot be desensitized to sin. If you are desensitized, you will not be bothered, right? Imagine a scenario where Paul walks around immersed in idolatry beyond his wildest imagination and feels nothing. Imagine. He's completely unbothered. How would that be possible if not for apathy? How would that be possible? It would be possible if he was so used to the presence of idols and to the often grotesque nature and sexual imagery of the statues that to look upon them was just another Tuesday. I think one of the weaknesses of the modern church, and I humbly include myself, is that we have too low a threshold for what bothers us. The same way you can become nose blind to bad smells in your house, you can become desensitized to flagrant sin that should provoke you. Maybe you remember in your life the first time you saw something in a movie or on TV that really bothered you. An unexpected sex scene, an unexpected homosexual kiss, an unexpected moment of violence that was far beyond anything you had seen in your life. And when you saw it, there was that sense of just disgust. Your heart rate went up. You felt an immediate sense of guilt for having seen it. Many of you know what I'm talking about. But many of you also know that if you allow a second, third, fourth, fifth time, push the boundary a little bit, that sense of guilt is less and less, isn't it? That disgust is minimized. Being provoked to a righteous anger over sin is God's mechanism for protecting you. In the same way, your ability to feel pain when you touch a burning stove is God's mechanism for protecting you. It's not good to feel nothing when you're being harmed. Satan would love nothing more than you to have regularly sin in your life with no provocation, no bother, and no disgust. So first, you want to make sure you're not desensitized so that you can be provoked in the first place, because it's good to be provoked by sin. Secondly, to be provoked in a good way, you have to be able to discern idolatry when it's in front of your face. To discern idolatry. So we've said that Paul needs to be bothered, but now I want to say that Paul needs to be able to recognize that idols are idols. That may sound funny because, if you're in India and you see a big gold statue with the body of a man and the head of an elephant, you're probably looking at an idol, right? But in our American context, the presence of idolatry may be somewhat more veiled than that. Horned Ginsburg tentacle creature notwithstanding. We may think that idols like Baal and Asherah, or gods like Zeus and Thor and Artemis and Hermes and Athena are no big deal because they're not even real. And they're not. There is no god named Baal or Zeus. People created them, and when they worship them, they're worshiping nothing. We know that there's only one actual true God who exists. So because of this truth that we rightly affirm, it's possible that we get a little light in our discernment and let our guards down. Here's what I mean. In Deuteronomy 32:17, we are told that the gods and idols that were sacrificed to by pagans in the Promised Land were not just idols, but that they were actually demons. So you may see a Baal statue and think it's just a golden calf. They just think they're controlling the weather and their crop cycles. But God says in Deuteronomy 32, a demon inspired them to make that statue. You may think the Asherim poles were just idols to the goddess of sex and war, but God says that a demon was behind that temple prostitution and worship. You may think that Moloch was just a statue of a bull, but why did people feel compelled to worship it by offering their children to it in the fire? Because it was demonically inspired. If you don't think that there are gods and idols today fronting for demons, you're not discerning correctly. We may not have Molech, but we have Planned Parenthood. We may not have Baal temples and Asherim poles on the high places, but we have pornography and strip clubs and a culture obsessed with sexual deviance. Hebrews 13:2 confirms it is possible that we encounter angels and are unaware of it. I'd like to pose the question in reverse. How often do we encounter the work of demons and are unaware of it? If you don't see idolatry as idolatry, you won't be provoked by it. I want to say one more thing and make us think critically, okay? I'm still working this out, all right? We're free associating here. I'm a fan of the Marvel movies. I want to put it out there and out myself before I say what I'm about to say. I've watched them from Iron Man to Endgame, and to me, they get bad after that. That's just me. I've seen most of the DC movies. I want you to know that too, though not all, but most. And I'm just thinking out loud. Has there been any creation of art or culture in the modern era to propagate and normalize the interaction with gods and goddesses more than the recent superhero movie craze? And one more. It just hit me as I was preparing this week. Is it strange that we would celebrate Paul for being provoked in the streets of Athens by the same God that we watch as entertainment? Something for your consideration and for my consideration. If you refuse to see idolatry, then you will not be provoked by it when it's there. If you've committed that nothing is an idol, then nothing will ever bother you. So we've said that to be provoked, you need to be not desensitized to sin. You need to have discernment. Thirdly, if you want to be provoked, you need to have a profound passion for the glory of God. I think that Paul was clearly driven in his ministry by the glory of God, meaning that he desired more than anything else to see all people in all places glorify God as he is rightly deserved. I'm talking about that Habakkuk 2:14 kind of passion, that the earth would be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as waters cover the sea. Every inch of real estate, every speck of dirt, every drop of water belongs to Jesus Christ. Can I quote John Piper? He said, "There is not one square inch on planet Earth over which the risen Christ does not say, 'Mine, I rule it, I am supreme over it.'" That's just true. Look, you as a Christian have to have some jealousy for the glory of God in this world. And at the end of the day, when someone makes an idol out of wood and clay, we should be bothered, because that's a misuse of God's trees and God's dirt. You don't have the right to take gold that God put in the rocks to honor himself and make an idol out of it. That's God's gold. That gold exists to glorify God, and that's true of your body and my body. That's true of our lives, of this church, of every people, nation, tribe, and tongue on the planet. It all exists for God because it was made by God to showcase the glory of God. And we need to care if God is glorified. So I think that we need to be provoked as Paul was, because he was not desensitized. He was able to discern, and he had a passion for God's glory. He saw, he was bothered, he was irritated, he was provoked in his spirit. Similarly, you should be as well.